Can you hear me? Awesome. But yeah. Oops. All right, so you can hear me.
right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Autonomous IT Live, brought to you by Automox. We've got a really exciting show planned for you today. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Autonomous IT Live, brought to you by Automox. We've got a really exciting show planned for you today, and we'll be doing an incident response drill. So why are we doing an incident response drill? Well, there's a reason pro athletes, musicians, firefighters, me today, I have Tom Boyer and Ryan Bronstein. Would you guys like to go ahead and introduce yourselves real quick?
Sure. Hey, everyone, and thanks for joining and continuing to support our journey here at Automox. I'm Tom Boyer, and I run, my title is Senior Director of Security and Technical Operations, and I run Security and IT and SRE at Automox.
All right. And then Ryan, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick too? If he is there, maybe. No.
Maybe
All
he
right.
needs a little more IT.
He might need some more IT. Those security team
A little
guys.
more IT help today.
Yeah, Ryan, you might have to hop out and come back in, and we'll let you in a second though. But all right. Well, anyways, I am Landon Miles. I am the technical content manager here at Automox, and we're gonna run through this live show. So we'll give Ryan a second to hop back in, and then we will get started. But Tom, do you have anything you want to add kind of about incident response drills and kind of why they're important?
It's really about getting your reps in, right? As security practitioners, as IT practitioners, the worst possible time to understand who to call, when to call, who you should be talking to, both inside your company and outside your company, is when there's an actual incident going on, when stress is at, level 1000. So it's really important to just have some semblance of a incident response process at your organization, whether it's, whether you're a Fortune 500 or even just a small mom and pop business. Knowing who to call at your cyber insurance provider, knowing who to contact at the FBI, knowing who to contact, if you have breach counsel or any outside counsel supporting you in your day to day, is really, really important, and really important to exercise on a few times a year. So when those times come, you're not as unprepared as you would otherwise be in the event that you don't exercise on it. So just having those things even typed up, and having a playbook, having checklists, having all those things that are so important, prepped and ready to go, will make you better off in the long run. So yeah, I'll say that's kind of my the best
Good.
advice I could give in the very beginning, right? Just know who to call is really important.
Absolutely. Oh, hey, we got Ryan back now. So
It was very weird. My mic was completely grayed out, but
all right. Well, Tom was just talking about kind of the importance of incident response drills, but we'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick also, and then we'll go ahead and get started with the incident response drill.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Ryan Bronstein. I am the manager of security over here at Automox. I've been in every random bit of field of tech at this point, from IT to security to infrastructure. So that's pretty much what I do here.
Yeah, and most importantly, as Ryan pointed out, the reason we asked him on is because Tom and I are both bald, and Ryan has hair, so that works too. His hair looks magnificent. So
for now, I assume a few more years in security will really thin this bad boy out.
Eventually, it runs this way, and then it runs this way. You'll just have to grow a beard to compensate, right? That's the trick.
I'll do my best. I don't know. It doesn't really come in as well as yours.
All right, so I'm going to give a quick overview of the incident response drill. So with these, you want to make sure that they're fairly tailored towards what you're actually going to be facing. So for this one, an attacker, so an employee had some reused credentials in SSO. An attacker was able to access some internal tools, impersonate IT, send out some Slack messages to have people install other software, email, kind of push stuff around that way. And our objective is to contain the breach, remove the attacker, harden the environment with any of these breaches. I mean, it's kind of contain, fix, understand, and improve so it doesn't happen again. So with that, I'm going to hit pause, and then we're going to go and pretend like we're in an anomaly. And so so we got problems. All right, so here we go. All right, Ryan, you just got a SIM alert of an unusual geographic or IP-based login. Automated triage confirms SSO access from a strange location. And we've got a few user reports saying that, hey, they got some weird Slack messages from IT asking them to install software. There's been a few emails going around. There has been some calendar invites for fake remote support sessions. So one of the Slack messages we have right here is from employee made up named Jim Reynolds. And it says, hope you're doing well and crushing it this week, arm emoji. Just a heads up, I recently moved to the IT team. Crazy, right? And we're rolling out some internal updates to help with endpoint support and diagnostics. Could you do me a favor and install this tool on your laptop? It's called Remote Help Support Setup.exe. It's nothing fancy, just a part of our new support stack. And then it has a link saying click here to download it. So the interesting thing is, and I'll let you both weigh in on this, and we'll pause to discuss this a little bit, is that like with the advent of LLMs and chat GPTs and AI, you can create really specific sounding things that's not full of typos like they used to be or misspelled words. Like you can kind of craft something that sounds realistic when for phishing or for any of these. And that takes just a few seconds now, and it doesn't have to be someone that is very familiar with your industry, with your tech stack, with anything, or even speaking necessarily your language. They can just kind of put that in there, pull it out, and have it going, and have them pointing to the software that they want you to install. So Tom, Ryan, kind of, what are your thoughts on kind of this attack surface so far?
You want me to start first, Tom, or you want to go first?
No, you can go.
All right. And I'll probably talk about this a little later, but we are very close with our IT team over here at Automox, and I encourage most organizations to develop that relationship very well. So that would immediately stand out to me as not something that was ever communicated to us by IT. So I would immediately spin up an incident on that and get as many hands on deck as possible to pull as much information and start containing the breach as a whole without destroying too much and logging. Yeah. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot here to unpack on this incident specifically. You know, the first thing, right, is we have an alert from our SSO provider that says, you know, new GeoIP detected. And to me, that's like, okay, let's fire up our incident in security. Let's begin triage. Let's pull in logs. Let's look, you know, let's take a Slack backup. You know, those Slack logs are going to be so important, both from where they logged in from, who they're impersonating, and also the messages that they sent. And, you know, we're a big Slack shop here internally, but, you know, whether you use Slack or not, it's important to understand if everything is retained, because sometimes they'll delete the messages after. So they'll send a message like this, they'll have the user download it, and they'll delete the messages after. And if you don't have that kind of retention period or those retention capabilities set up in your messaging platform, then you're going to miss a lot of context. You know, sometimes your employees will take screenshots like, hey, I got this suspicious message. Is this IT? But it's good to have kind of, you know, the backup data to prove whether it was or wasn't some kind of suspicious activity. So make sure that kind of stuff is kind of practice and rehearse, and you're pulling that stuff into your SIEM if you have it, or you're working with your IT team to say, hey, how do I get a copy of the last 30 days of all of our Slack transactions, and how do I browse through these things in an event of an incident? Because just having a basic understanding of how those systems work on the back end can save you so much time. And really, when these incidents kick off and you're in the weeds fighting the fire, and just having some capabilities built out internally is really important.
I do think that's a good note also, that most of the corporate messaging platforms, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack or whichever other one you're using, most of them will have that retention policy active, and that's kind of the sign of a good solution also, is that if we need to audit this, we can internally.
Absolutely.
He also highlighted something that I think is also really important, is our security team is very transparent internally with our employee base. And so, the screenshots of the messages and stuff like that, getting communication out to your other end users is a great non-destructive way to contain a breach, because it's also sometimes concerning. There are some platforms where you'll, shut down a user, and killing that access kind of sometimes destroys logs. And so just
be a familiar face is really what I try to
make friends.
Exactly. The last thing you want is the security team only communicating when things are bad, or never at all. So they're like, what is this, right? Who are these people talking to me right now? Instead of, we're very, very transparent on the team here. We post stuff in Slack when we see new phishing trends against our employees, or new, SMS phishing campaigns hitting our employees. We're immediately posting in our announcement channel, like, hey, the CEO phishing is back. He's never going to ask you to buy gift cards. So please don't do that.
Your CEO will never ask you to buy you a gift card via text.
I think we even put that in our security training.
Yes. Exactly. So. And something I always keep in mind, and there are plenty of playbooks around incident response and containment, and NIST has a great one, but something that helps me and has helped me throughout my career is just always having a theory in mind of what's going on. As an incident commander responding to an incident, or even just being a participant, understanding kind of what the working theory is between everyone involved is really important. So you can, try to prove or disprove what's going on. And, Landon showed this one specifically for this, the IT one, right? What's going on? We have an IT actor in our system. He possibly came via the IDP, so he's in the SSO, so he or they got into Slack through the SSO provider, right? That's the running theory. How did they get in? What other systems did they access? What other adversaries in the industry work like this? Is this like a scattered spider attack? They're very prevalent right now against airlines, as we saw, and other types of industries like that, right? So if you're in those industries, just understanding the capabilities of your adversary and having that front and center as you're working these incidents of okay, here's their capabilities, here's where they like to pivot, here are the systems they like to target, because it's often not random. They're not just randomly poking around at things. They're very targeted. They have a plan in mind of how they want to execute, and running that theory in your head as you're going through these responses is incredibly important.
Yeah. And as important as that, I would say, as much as knowing their strategies, understand how your environment works. What direction would you take if you were trying to get to the crown jewels? Where they are. So understanding how someone could move through your environment, it's something that you should really be working on daily, but especially as you go through incidents, work that muscle of understanding where someone would go next, or where someone could go next.
Yeah, it's the old if I was a bad guy, what would I do question.
Attacker mindset.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So kind of we've identified that this is a problem. We've kind of gone through a little bit. So to contain the breach, what are our next steps? So we disable the Slack profile, we disable the SSO account temporarily, and we start trying to revoke active sessions here. Like, can you guys go into that a little bit? Like, what would you do to start to contain this breach?
Yeah, so I mean, you really kind of covered it, like, especially if you have a central identity provider, disabling those accounts will be key. I know we have a lot of things set up that, like, most of the time, if SCIM is shutting down a user or freezing a user, it will kill the sessions.
Yeah.
But we actually have some automations and workflows in our SOAR and some of our other products here that end up going through and resetting sessions, like directly with like one of our security tokens, like into one of our SaaS platforms. And we usually focus on like most important ones first. Obviously, we're going to immediately, reset sessions for like AWS, our IDP, places where people could just dump information from, like your Confluences, your SharePoints, stuff like that.
So anywhere where there's important confidential data stored, that's
GitHub.
Exactly. So where you don't want, if there's anything that you don't want going out to the world, that's where you kind of go to make sure is locked down first.
Yeah. And I would even say, like, especially like if you can find like not only that user, but users that receive that message, going in and immediately burning their like PAT tokens or any kind of like API token, getting in there and just blowing those out immediately.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then so we talked about this a little bit earlier, but kind of sending out an internal alert at this point is good, whether it's just, hey, like a heads up, IT is never going to ask you to install software via a link in a Slack message or an email. Like, just getting kind of ahead of that. I mean, a lot of times people are more attuned to watching for phishing emails. But with a Slack message, people are kind of assuming that, oh, this person is actually who they say they are. Which kind of goes to this modern kind of the theory behind this is that attackers don't necessarily break in anymore. It's a lot easier for them to log in. It's easier to steal a credential than to find a backdoor into somewhere.
I would even say, there's not only that, like, having great like tooling that you can like quarantine a device while still having access to it, especially in a remote workspace, is huge. Like, we have secure network solutions where we have like a SCIM group that will immediately move someone to restrict all network access except to, our remote agents to get into it. And then our EDR also does the same. So knowing those ways of cutting off movement as well is a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. And then what about kind of if scanning your environment for that software, removing the software that was installed maliciously? So, I mean, obviously we're Automox, but I mean, so one of the ways that we would do this is through a worklet, which is just a way to scale an automation script so it can scan that endpoint, see if it's installed, see if a registry key has been changed or something. And if it has, it can flag it, say, hey, this is an issue, and you can go ahead and do that. Remove the malicious tool, block any C2 domains at that endpoint level, and then tag any of those devices like you were talking about for forensic review. Is there anything else we're kind of missing in those steps?
Yeah, I mean, like you covered like the worklet. Like we use a worklet here, and like any kind of solution like an Automox can do this, but like during the XZ vuln situation, it wasn't even as like critical as like an immediate somebody's in our stack incident, but we still use a script to search for that vulnerable version within our stack and output a report of users that are affected, and then deploy another one to patch it and then compare that list again. And so, just knowing your endpoints, knowing your stack, I think it's always going to come back to that.
Just being able to see into those endpoints also is because if you didn't have visibility into your endpoints, you'd be blind at this point. So like, it's like, hey, there's a big problem going on, but I can't do anything. I can't see anything. But having a tool that says, okay, this is what's running on these endpoints. This is how it operates, with your EDR, with your endpoint management solution, that like without those solutions, you're blind. So
yeah, we're kind of spoiled here where we have a lot of visibility into our infrastructure and in our endpoints. So if any threat actors watching, we have a lot of visibility. We're very spoiled here. So
and I think outside of the endpoint kind of quarantining and similar actions, it's also important to have the security team download this malware. You don't have to be an expert in reversing or similar, right? Just having some sort of detonation capability, even through a lot of these online providers, a place you can upload an exe and see kind of what it's doing, what network calls it's making, how it's operating. It's really important as well to understand.
So what's it going to do if someone actually runs this thing?
Exactly. Like what's the blast radius here, and then building some detection rules around that feature set and uploading that to your EDR or your SOAR or your SIEM or whatever you're using to build detections in is kind of the next step. Because not only that the first piece, the blocking, the containment, the eradication is really important, but there's an expectation now in the industry where if a breach, say this blows up into a large breach, the industry expects you to provide some kind of after actions report, and having like hashes and IP addresses and malware samples and how those things were executed is really important to show, hey, we're not just some mom and pop. This is, how we responded. This is how we contained it. Here's what we saw. Here's what you should be looking for in your environment. Attackers often reuse techniques and playbooks and infrastructure sometimes and capabilities. So just providing that back to the industry is so very important to keep not just us safe, but the industry as a whole safe. So make sure you're documenting, those hashes, IP addresses, all those good things to provide a good after actions report to, your board, the industry, your team, those kind of things. Keep that in mind.
Yeah. So now that it's kind of, we've contained it, we're starting to try to figure out why this happened, how this happened. So at this point, like, how do we figure out if it's a targeted attack, if it's an inside job, if it's an attack of convenience? Like, was it really Jim Reynolds or whoever sending out this from his own work laptop saying,
Jim's gone rogue, everybody.
Jim's gone rogue.
Why would Jim do this to us?
How dare him?
Yeah. So like, how do you figure out? I mean, do you just call the guy and say, hey, like, saw this weird login, or inside job attack of convenience, whether it's Shodan or something, somebody just found those credentials, logged in, said, hey, this works, I can get in now. So like, at what point do you start trying to figure out how this happened?
Yeah. And I think we're moving now from like, I call it from like the easy part, even though it's not necessarily easy, like the containment, the initial response, everyone's on 100 and we're all responding quickly, solving the problem and getting it done, to like the long tail remediation piece.
Like, how do I make this not happen again?
Right. Like what happened?
Yeah.
How did they get in? And how do I make this not happen again? And, sometimes this involves engaging, an incident response provider outside of your business through your cyber insurance. Sometimes you're already doing it internally as a team. And this is like the week's work, right? The first, when they're first in, that's like the hours work, containing it quickly. Now we're moving into like weeks worth of work, eyes on glass, reviewing logs, like line by line by line by line. And, maybe new agentic AI, it'll be a little bit easier for this phase, but, we're reviewing line by line by line, understanding the timeline of the incident. They got in here through this user, through this IP address, using this credential set. Well, it wasn't the user because we asked them. And now it's like, was it bad credentials? Potentially they reused some credentials in some other system and that system was breached, and then they were able to capture it. Is there some form of credential stealing software on our endpoint that our EDR is not detecting? That's always a possibility. And there's the other scarier situations of like, were they paid to give their credentials up, which is not out of the ordinary these days. Sometimes people are paid off and they give direct access to systems. So that's the that's the hard part, is really finding that almost needle in a haystack of like, this is how they got in. Let me look at all my logs, and I literally have to look at all my logs and see, I have to prove, you have to prove your theory, right? We kind of like, and I'll go back to that theory idea over and over again, right? Like, we have this theory, now we have to prove it. Well, how do we prove it? Well, we prove it with data, we prove it with logs, we prove it with discussions with the individual. Obviously they're in sales and they're not trying to phish the organization, so they probably were compromised. Well, how do they do it? Well, maybe LinkedIn is compromised, and that's a whole nother mess. Or maybe they use their email, their work email, on some personal sites, and that thing got compromised, right? Like, that's kind of the, how do we get from compromise and work our way back to how this actually happened, and then making things more secure from there. You can jump in, Ryan. I don't mean to hog the.
No. I mean, look, I've been bebopping in and out, like, and interrupting when I feel a need, but that's all very true. Like, I still remember one of my first incidents here, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I was just here pulling IT logs for, I think, you on a security incident, and I was just like, I assume they got in like this, and you were like, well, don't assume. Show me. Like, and that's always like stuck with me through my whole career in general at this point. And I think that's just like a really good talking point there is engaging with the individual. Because sometimes that even happens in the hours section, like the investigation section. Like, you'll bring them into it. But, like, in this case, it's a compromised Slack account, so you don't know if you're bringing in the threat actor or that person. So a lot of times it's good to have protocols in place as well for external communications with users, to just kind of like
reaching out to your HR department saying, hey,
yeah,
you call this person on their cell phone instead of through like any internal means. So
because like data will provide a lot too, and then there's a lot of enrichment around that data by talking to the affected individual and other individuals that engage with them. That's the week's work probably that Tom is talking about as well. And we've, when we've ever had an investigation like that, we pull people in and like we start talking to them, and that's when it's good to have a good incident commander. Because like when you first spin up an incident, you're probably hands on the keyboard, going hard at just trying to lock this down and triage it on your own until your team can swarm. And then you have to kind of stand up above that and go, okay, I need you to do this. I need you to do this, grab these people and talk to these people. So it's another reason why you do these reps, so that you can have that practice. In terms of, I mean, are we in full remediation talks here now, or are we talking about still just kind of gathering the data?
Yeah, I think we can, whichever point you want to go to next. You had a beat on something, I'll let you go for it.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of turns into this situation where you're trying to, keep your security controls in place, understanding how those affect the users, understanding how they got around your current controls in general. And as you find that, you can talk with your team and go, hey, like, how can we stop this one from happening again? And I'm talking about like, people get a lot. I think something we've experienced here is MFA fatigue. Like when you get that push notification, and a lot of like big providers use that, and it's very good. Like as long as your users are like not getting that fatigue, it's a very, very like good system. But one thing that we've moved to here is like hardware tokens, because like it's a very deliberate action of logging into something.
Kind of we've been a phishing resistant MFA where you're not getting the spam for push like 20 different notifications, log in, yes or no. And
like you can sleep at night, you won't get a ping in the middle of the night from someone trying to log into your account on your verification app. And you again making it very deliberate for your users to log in while still kind of keeping it ease of use. It's kind of like the park ranger thing where you got a trash can that you don't want a bear to get into, and like there's a very thin line between the smartest of bears and the humans. So you have to kind of think around that as you're thinking about these remediation steps.
Yeah, so we did have I'll interrupt real quick. We had a question come through on LinkedIn. So kind of asking about, so we had talked about downloading the malware, extracting the malware, kind of running through that. Can you go into kind of how you would do that? How you would see what the malware is doing?
Yeah, and to answer the question in the chat, right, like VX Underground, it's really great, especially if you download it on your work computer and you're not in security, right? Like, absolutely. So it's really about, you know, having some place to detonate malware, having some kind of capability internally on your team to, you know, whether you're using a virtual machine or whether you're hosting kind of like a malware zoo internally within your security team, just having a place where you can download malware safely and then detonating it, whether that's, like I said, within internally you're doing it yourself, you know, you're clicking the executable and just watching it, you know, recording network traffic with Wireshark or something, or you're uploading it to Joe Sandbox or something where you can just upload the executable and then it you know, it detonates it for you and provides you kind of like a summary report around, you know, what capabilities it has or what's it contacting, what registry keys it's using, those kind of things. So, you know, there are lots of places, but you know, having that workflow down is also really important. But yeah, shout out to VX Underground.
Yeah, I would.
It's a great
Also, with in a cloud environment, I feel like I should also bring up, like, you know, sometimes like full pods or instances are going to get infected and you need to run, you know, some kind of scans on them or not. One thing that we do internally is we have a separate, a sandbox cloud account that's separate from the rest of all of our environments. And we have a bit of a workflow that can then send like that, you know, just isolate and like clone that, like that EC2 instance and move over there and run through processes of scanning it and whatnot. And I think that's something that as you move more into the cloud space, you should be aware of. Like in this case, it's an endpoint, but that endpoint could quickly spread into the cloud if they have network access. So having a plan for that as well is a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's coming kind of to the end. We're coming close to the end of our time here. But so
he's playing the music. He's playing the music.
About to start.
Play me off, Johnny.
So kind of wanted to go through some lessons learned here a little bit. So I mean, real credentials plus real tools is kind of the stealthy way to get in. I mean, it's not, you don't have to spend a lot of money on a 0-day or backdoor. It's like, it's easier just to, hey, I can log in instead of, I can pretend that I'm the right person instead of having to go through a back door. These things can be weaponized pretty quickly, and identity is not always equal to trust. So Tom, yeah. Ryan, we'll go through this one and then we'll wrap up. But I just kind of wanted to, the identity trust, there's been a lot of talk about that recently also. So zero trust, all that stuff, kind of zero. What are you guys's, can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I say, you know, understanding your environment, like Ryan alluded to earlier, and alerting on deviations. You know, we use one certain tool for our IT team to remotely access systems, and any deviation outside of that should be an alert. You know, that's just a really, really common way attackers get in. And sometimes they'll disguise things as like other legitimate software. You know, sometimes they'll impersonate Zoom or Slack or whatever, right? But having digitally signed software and alerting on those deviations is another great example of, like, you know, kind of trust, but also verify what we're running, alert on deviations, and working closely with your IT team and understanding what tools they're deploying, and, you know, having that repertoire down around when they deploy, how do they deploy, what does that look like? You know, because most teams deploy applications through a certain workflow, whether it's an RRM tool or a tool like Automox, or, you know, sometimes they're manually running PowerShell scripts on the endpoints. But just understanding that workflow and how are you protecting that workflow for them, and it is really, really important. And, you know, make sure you're setting yourself up for success from a remote communication standpoint. You know, tools like Slack, they have the ability to lock down changing your name, and you can only change your name if it gets changed in like the HR payroll system, having that integration set up. Because in Slack today, or for a long time, even here internally, you could impersonate other people where you would just change your display name, and you could have two tomboyers running around, and we would do it to each other in the security team. And
so that's why that didn't work the other day.
That was extreme. That was a very confusing day for me.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't like a top-down thing either, right? Like a lot of the stuff bubbles up from internally within the teams of like, hey, I can impersonate people. We should get this taken care of. And yeah, you want people to be able to set their display name and stuff, but just make it done in the HR system and not in Slack, because you could easily impersonate people in Slack, and then it causes a big mess, right?
Yeah. And I would say, as like speaking with the policies and procedures aspect of things, like having good procedures, like Tom said, like it creates a lack of deviation. And so, if you're lucky enough to have a solid compliance team, legal team, lean on them to get a lot of these policies in place to kind of support that standardization of workflows within an organization, because that only helps to kind of embolden your control making within like your SEMs and stuff like that. So, we're very lucky, and we have a great legal team and a compliance team that kind of helps us, bottleneck it a bit.
Add a little resistance,
As much as we always talk about the importance of IT and security working together, it's just as important for those to work with other people within the other departments within the organization. Talk with your HR, talk with your accounting, like work with everybody to be able to understand what their workflow is, what their pain points are, and be able to kind of understand your systems. So being able to understand everything, being able to understand your network, how everything works sounds trivial, but it's critically important too. So the people are important. So.
I would say security, like the mindset should be security is everyone's responsibility within an organization. And so you should not be a stranger to any org within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, both of you, for joining. Thanks everyone for watching. We do have, I'll put this in the comments here shortly and in the description for anybody watching this later, but we do have kind of if you've never done an incident response drill before, we put together a little document. I'll share my screen right here. That is just kind of an incident response checklist. We'll put this in the comments in the descriptions of these live shows also. It just kind of walks you through choosing a scenario, running the drill, post drill, kind of what we did here, tabletop walking through. So be looking for that. It'll be in the description, like I said. But yeah, so that is the live show. Thank you so much, Tom, Ryan, for joining. If you guys enjoyed this, be sure to tune into their Patch Tuesday podcast. Very similar to this one. But yeah, is there any parting words of wisdom that you guys would like to share?
Take care of your people.
Yep.
Yeah.
Always have a running theory. Those are my two.
Man, those are hard. I mean, again, I would just say know your environment and lean on your team. So, yeah.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you guys so much, and we will see everyone soon.
See you, everyone.